Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Communication Book, 44 Ideas for Better Conversations Every Day, by Mikael Krogerus and Roman Tschäppeler, translated by Jenny Peening and Lucy Jones, narrated by Mike Cooper. Introduction. We need to talk. Communication is a bit like love. It's what makes the world go round. But nobody really knows how it works. Communication is something natural, something everyday even, yet most of us have only a vague notion of the rules that govern it. Day in, day out, we ask questions, read, explain, write, listen, argue, discuss, or hold our tongues. But only a few of us have the necessary tools to improve the way we communicate or to understand how we're being communicated with. This was the starting point for our exploration of communication theory. For this book, we delved into some of the most important communication theories, assessed their relevance, condensed them, simplified them in the form of diagrams, and applied them to modern-day challenges. We also enhanced them with practical tips and methods. The result? 44 up-to-date approaches for dealing with eternal problems, from relationships to job interviews, fake news to the filter bubble effect, small talk to the annual presentation. This book is actually an exhibition, which came about as follows. The Museum of Communication in Bern, Switzerland, contacted us and asked if we could explain the most important theories in communication history in diagrams. Until 2030, you can experience this book live in the museum. Job and Career. 1. 6 Principles of Persuasion. How to Influence People by Robert Cialdini. An American psychologist, Dr. Robert Cialdini, has devoted much of his career to one of the most basic and at the same time biggest questions within communication. When do people say yes? Or, more explicitly, can we make them say yes? Cialdini identified 6 universal principles that explain how you can persuade someone to accept your suggestion. 1. Reciprocity. This is basically the old biblical principle, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Put into action, if you want to get something, give something. The right order is important. Offer something first, then ask for what you want. 2. Authority. We tend to follow the advice of experts. We have more trust in a doctor who is wearing a white coat and displaying diplomas on the wall. Put into action, in your area of expertise, find out what the white coat is. 3. Consistency. We look up to people who are consistent in their words and behaviours. Put into action, stick to one message. Don't follow every trend. Be the consistent one. People will remember you for that. 4. Consensus. We are herd people. We do what others do. This is called social proof. Put into action, if you want someone to do something, show others doing it. People who bought this book also bought ... 5. Scarcity. We all want that which is rare, and we are all afraid to lose what we have. Put into action, it might not be enough to talk about the benefits of your offer. You also need to point out what people will lose if they fail to act. This also holds true if people face change. They're usually scared of what they might lose. Therefore, it's good to tell them what they will lose if they fail to move. 6. Liking. This is the most universal principle. People prefer to say yes to people they like. But who do we like? According to Cialdini, there are 3 factors. We like people who are similar to us. We like people who complement us. We like people who cooperate with us toward a common goal. Get in the habit of helping people out, and don't say, no big deal. Say, of course, it's what partners do for each other. Label what happened an act of partnership. Robert Cialdini. 2. Rules of Meetings. Why Meetings Take So Long by C. Northcutt Parkinson. It is one of the great mysteries of the modern world of work. Why are meetings so exhausting, and why do they take so long? According to Seth Godin, there are only 3 kinds of meetings. Information, a meeting in which the participants are informed about something, whether they like it or not. Discussion, A meeting that aims to give input or direction or to receive feedback. Permission. A meeting in which one side proposes something in the hope that the other says yes, but has the right and the power to say no. What often makes meetings frustrating is the fact that different people might think it's a different kind of meeting. Here are some tips to make meetings run more smoothly. The 15-minute rule. Parkinson's law states, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion, and not according to how complex it really is. Therefore, it makes sense to limit the time of meetings. Incidentally, studies show that the attention span of the average person is between 10 and 18 minutes. Ideally, you should use a timer. When it rings, the meeting is over, immediately. The question rule. There are 3 types of question that you can ask in a meeting. First, comprehension questions. Second, questions to support the process, for example, to make sure that everyone has really understood everything and is talking about the same thing. And third, questions that show how much you know in order to underscore your own position or challenge another person. All 3 types of question are legitimate, but they should not be mixed. First come comprehension questions, then questions about the process, then debate questions. The standing rule. In many companies, meetings are held with everybody standing up because it leads to decisions being reached more quickly. At Washington University, studies showed that when they're standing, people react more readily with enthusiasm, whereas when they're sitting, they tend towards skepticism. The smartphone rule. No smartphones during the meeting. Notes should be made by hand. Even the White House supposedly followed this rule under Barack Obama. If you want to call a family meeting, just turn off the Wi-Fi router and wait in the room where it's located. 3. Boss talk. How to talk to your team. Close your eyes for a moment and think about the best boss you ever had. Now think of the worst one. What set them apart? Most likely, your best boss not only achieved good results, but was also a good communicator. Good bosses get the best out of their employees every day, or at least give them the feeling they're achieving their full potential. But how do they do it? In the context of this book, the question is, how do you communicate properly with your employees, with your team? Obviously, there can't be a universal answer. Every person, every situation, every company, every relationship is different. At the same time, we all know that we should speak to our team the way we would like to be spoken to, considerately, directly, clearly. We've translated these adverbs into rules. 1. Don't criticize. This might sound a bit too easygoing, and of course you have to evaluate the work of your employees, that's your job. But go easy on the criticism. Only start deconstructing if you're prepared to help with the rebuilding. Keep using we, especially when your team is lost. 2. Give praise, but not too much. Go easy on the compliments, otherwise they lose their effect. If you celebrate behavior that you expect, you're lowering standards. Whatever you do, don't give praise simply to please. 3. Practice what you preach. Nothing rings more hollow than words that aren't backed up by deeds. If punctuality and friendliness are important to you, then be punctual and friendly. Set the pace, demonstrate values, establish the tone. But pick your battles. Only set standards that are important to you or that you consider to be generally important. You ought to be good at upholding standards that are important to you, and if there are standards that you regard as important but find hard to uphold, then you need to learn them yourself. Share this with your employees. Nobody can be good at everything. As a leader, get used to the idea that you are primarily responsible for the supply of energy. In other words, motivating, advising, stabilizing, providing momentum, and letting others shine. 4. The salami tactic. How to carry through every idea. Meetings are known to reveal a person's character. Generally speaking, there are 4 personality types in meetings. 1. The silent type. Says nothing, is thereby usually proven right, and always thinks he or she knows better. 2. The opportunist is enthusiastic about every suggestion, especially those made or favoured by the boss. 3. The master of the obvious announces the obvious with great conviction, as if he or she had just thought it up. 4. The naysayer's purpose in life seems to be to pull apart other people's suggestions. So how can you get a suggestion past these hellhounds? A particularly effective method seems to be the salami tactic. Don't put your suggestion forward all in one go, but serve it in small, easily digestible slices instead. This portioning method has two advantages. First, the fear of a huge task or bold idea is reduced. Second, a measured presentation allows the other participants to explore the idea themselves and think it through further. And above all, this tactic does not allow the other participants to recognize your overarching intention. This makes it harder to fight against it. If there are ideological rifts, it is better to take small, isolated steps and concentrate on the matter at hand, not on the intended outcome. And what do you do if someone tries to salami you? Simply ask, "Is that everything?" Keep on asking until everything is on the table. Only then start negotiating, setting one slice of salami off against a slice of your own. The origin of the term is unclear. Some sources say that in Hungary, salami tactica was the name given to the gradual takeover of power by the Communist Party. Disassemble a truck into many small parts, and a child can carry it. 5. Theory of Rhetoric. How to Make a Good Speech by Aristotle. In his definitive work, Rhetoric, Aristotle wrote that a good speaker has to have three things under control: the argument, logos, the presentation, ethos, and the audience, pathos. This may sound pompous, but it's just as valid today as in ancient times. In Aristotle's day, there were only three different types of rhetoric. The first was judicial rhetoric, which dealt primarily with past events. Then there was epideictic rhetoric, which typically celebrated a person in the present. A typical example is a eulogy, which Aristotle wrote addresses the mourners rather than the dead. And finally, there was deliberative rhetoric, such as political oratory, in which the speaker attempted to persuade the audience to carry out a certain action in the near future. Aristotle, and later the Romans Cicero and Quintilian, established a complex 5-point plan for writing brilliant speeches, which essentially boils down to this: you should put all the aces that you want to play up your sleeve in advance. Good preparation, in other words, is everything. Aristotle considered rhetoric not as a tool to convince the audience, but as an art form to help present a persuasive argument. This was the end to which the speaker should employ rhetoric. Because people with good ideas are often poor speakers, he provided them with a toolbox full of rhetorical resources. So Aristotle was, in fact, the first person to prepare academics for their TED Talks and keynotes. Here are 6 rhetorical tools. 1. Anaphora. Repetition of a word or phrase, typical in political speeches. I demand justice. I demand understanding. I demand... 2. Inversion. Reversing the usual word order, such as in infinite is his sorrow, instead of his sorrow is infinite. 3. Irony. Saying one thing when you really mean the opposite. For example, I really enjoyed being stuck in that traffic jam. 4. Rhetorical questions. Questions that make a statement. For example, would you like shiny, glossy hair? 5. Analogies. Comparisons. He stood there like a dying duck in a thunderstorm. Banal. Or, he was as confused as a comma at the end of a sentence. Creative. 6. Antithesis. A contrasting thought to produce tension. For example, he was beautiful, strong, and unhappy. In practice, the same applies to presentations as to speeches. Read through your text aloud several times. One full sheet of legal paper is about 4 minutes of presentation. Remember to integrate pauses. Look at your audience. Breathe deeply. A good speech is one that induces the listeners to change their minds while giving them the feeling that this change of opinion is their own decision. 6. Storytelling. How to Make the Most Boring Lecture Exciting by William Labov and Walter Fisher. Why do all fairy tales begin with the phrase, once upon a time? The answer is relevant for anyone who gives presentations. According to the sociolinguist William Labov, if we weave hard facts into narrative patterns, associations with well-known fairy tales are evoked in our memories that remind us of the pleasure of listening to them, with the consequence that our attention span increases. Classic fairy tales follow a particular sequence. Abstract. How does it begin? Once upon a time. Orientation. Who, where, when. A king and queen had a daughter. Complicating action. The problem to be solved. But all around the castle, a hedge of thorns started to grow. Resolution. Solution. Then he stooped and kissed Sleeping Beauty, and she opened her eyes for the first time in many, many years. Evaluation. What results from it? And they lived happily ever after. Coda. What remains? And the moral of the story? A lecture should be structured along the same lines. The idea is not new. Aristotle was already aware of the importance of emotion in speech-making, and in 1984 the communication researcher Walter Fisher came up with a radical thesis. People do not want logical arguments, they want good stories. Our life is not an Excel spreadsheet, it is a story with ups and downs. Fisher's idea is summed up in his famous narrative paradigm, which represents a break with classical rhetoric. We do not evaluate a story on the basis of arguments, but on the basis of how much we trust or believe in the story. Can I identify with the subject or the people? And its coherence. Does the story make sense? Chris Anderson, the inventor of TED, says something similar about the 3 rules for a perfect TED Talk. 1. Don't talk about a concept, a deficiency, or a product. Talk about an idea. 2. Focus on just one idea. 3. Talk about the idea in such a way that people will want to tell others about it. The next time you have to say something in front of other people, start your talk with this sentence. Let me tell you a short story. Or, on the way here, something strange happened to me. 7. Principled Negotiation. How to Reach an Agreement by Roger Fisher and William L. Ury. Negotiation is the fine art of finding a solution to an apparently impossible situation. One of the best-known negotiating methods, principled negotiation, is based on the book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William L. Ury. Let's break down their strategy and apply it to real life. Think about a complex situation. Negotiating your salary with your boss, pocket money with your children, a ransom demanded by a blackmailer, and try to apply the following principles to the situation. Thing, not person. Do not be distracted by whether you like the other person or not. Similarities, not differences. Don't think, I am in the weaker or stronger negotiating position. Ask yourself, what does the other person need from me? Do we have common interests? Good enough, not perfect. You should not be aiming for the maximum possible, because perfection is like the unicorn. It's rumoured to exist, but nobody has ever seen it. So, alongside your desired outcome to the negotiation, have a plan B prepared before negotiations even start. This is called the BATNA principle, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It offers the best alternative when an agreement can't be reached. There are 2 schools of thought when it comes to negotiation. The first believes that you have to negotiate hard and conquer the other side. It's not enough to win, someone has to lose. The other recommends negotiating softly in order to not put a strain on the relationship. Principled negotiation falls into the second camp and recommends cooperative negotiation. Negotiating properly means that everyone gets more than they originally hoped for. You must never try to make all the money that's in a deal. Let the other fellow make some money too, because if you have a reputation for always making all the money, you won't have many deals. J. Paul Getty. 8. The Feedback Method. How to Criticize by D. L. Cooperrider and D. Whitney. Feedback is one of the most sensitive processes in communication. It is easy to hurt people with criticism, but false compliments are also unhelpful. Harsh criticism damages our self-esteem and can lead us to make unwise choices, but flowery compliments often make us too complacent. As for the person giving the feedback, most people are prone to being critical, as it gives them a feeling of superiority. They feel like they need to crush bad or weird ideas. Feedback can be analysed along two axes. It can be negative or positive, and constructive or destructive. So this gives us 4 different types of feedback. 1. No. Negative, destructive feedback. You're simply told the idea is bad without being given an explanation or offered an alternative. While this can be, at times, an effective feedback, it seldom changes the behaviour of the receiver. 2. No, because negative, constructive feedback. You're being told you're wrong, and then you are presented with the correct answer. This is how old-school teaching works. 3. Yeah, but positive, destructive feedback. Most managers have sooner or later heard about the importance of giving positive feedback, so they start off by saying something positive about your idea just to deconstruct it afterward and offer a contrary opinion. The idea is good, but... 4. Yes and. The appreciative response. Try to find the one thing in the proposal that works and build on that. This goes back to appreciative inquiry, a method attributed to an American, David Cooper writer, that involves concentrating on the strengths, positive attributes, and potential of a company or a person rather than weaknesses. According to this theory, focusing too strongly on the flaws of an idea or project stifles the open and positive approach that is essential for good working practices. Careful. Of course, we sometimes have to deliver crystal clear or even harsh feedback, but the point is people learn better if they're offered constructive feedback. We know this from brainstorming sessions, where when the flow and fun increase, the more positive the exchange. Collaboration, it seems, dies when the response is negative and ideas are killed before they're explored. Whenever you're about to give feedback, ask yourself, how can I make this idea better, rather than why is this idea bad? 9. Groupthink. What happens when everyone has the same opinion? By Irving Janis. For a long time it was common knowledge that group decision-making was better than individual decision-making. Even today we often celebrate collaborations, consensual decisions, and teamwork. However, as early as 1972, a Yale psychologist, Irving Janis, pointed out in a spectacular, radical paper that sometimes also groups make very bad decisions. Janis had studied such debacles as Pearl Harbor or the Vietnam War, and what he found was that these groups had rejected critical opinions and outside information. In the warmth of a like-minded group, people reassure themselves that they're right, that their analysis is superior to that of outsiders, that their consensus is a sign of the strength of the group, when in fact they've been looking only for evidence that confirmed their objectives. And any doubts in the room were silenced, because if everyone seems enthusiastic and agrees with the plan, we will feel reluctant to speak up, even if we have serious doubts. This, by the way, seems to be one of the governing principles of Donald Trump's leadership strategy. Surround yourself with yes-sayers. Janis called the phenomenon that occurs when the desire for group consensus is stronger than the urge to express an unpopular opinion, groupthink. If this happens, the group is at risk of making very poor decisions. And even more, if many people are too sure of the same thing, they become radical and imprudent. Researchers have observed this phenomenon among jury members. The greater the consensus, the harsher the judgment, and the surer the jury is that its verdict is correct. When does groupthink occur? Typically when there is high group cohesiveness, high pressure to make a good decision, strong, persuasive, directive leadership. How can we avoid groupthink? Janis suggested several steps for preventing groupthink. Here are 2 great recommendations if you are the leader of a team. 1. Give a high priority to airing objections and doubts. In other words, encourage all group members to speak their mind, even and especially if the opinion is unpopular. 2. Divide your team into 2 and form competing teams to study the same problem. Compare results. When all think alike, no one is thinking. Walter Lippmann. 10. The Power Method. When the Force is With You, by Robert Greene. Most theories in this book argue that good communication has to do with cooperation, but in reality it's sometimes a different story. It is no coincidence that the book The 48 Laws of Power, a compilation of classic power strategies by the American author Robert Greene, was a bestseller. Borrowing from this book, here are some negotiating strategies that won't make you popular, but might help you come out on top. Warning: even if you prefer to convince people with good arguments rather than by mean tactics, you should know these tricks, because they're bound to be used against you. Never argue hesitantly. If you're unsure about something, try not to show it to others. Doubt and hesitation will only dilute your arguments. With for and against formulations, your adversary will see an opportunity to pounce. So only speak up when you're sure you want to follow through your argument, and stand your ground even if your plan is flawed. We forgive bold people their mistakes, but we have no confidence in doubters. Talk less. Counterintuitively, you should not try to convince the other person by talking a lot. The more you talk, the more interchangeable and ordinary your arguments seem. Every triumph that you achieve through words is in reality a Pyrrhic victory, because nobody likes to be argued into a corner. Act ignorant. We tend to be dazzled by intelligence and charisma. Try the opposite. Make your adversary feel clever. He or she will be flattered and become inattentive. When your opponent's guard drops, you can attack. Acting stupid is one of the oldest stratagems around. As they say in China, masquerade as a pig to kill the tiger. Give up. If you can't convince somebody, reassess your own situation. What will it cost me if I give up now? A smiling confession of your own defeat comes across as more self-assured than sullenness, and what's more, the less interest you show, the less satisfied your adversary will feel. Oysters open completely when the moon is full, and when the crab sees one, it throws a piece of stone or seaweed into it, and the oyster cannot close again, so that it serves the crab for meat. Such is the fate of him who opens his mouth too much, and thereby puts himself at the mercy of the listener. Leonardo da Vinci. 11. Intercultural Communication. How to Negotiate Abroad, by Geert Hofstede and Richard D. Lewis. There was once a Finn who loved his wife so much that he almost told her. It's a joke, and yet not a joke, because many Finns are indeed introverted, taciturn people. Anyone who has come into contact with other cultures knows that stereotypes and prejudices can't always be trusted. The Scots are frugal, the Swiss are punctual, the Finns are introverted, but that they do often contain a germ of truth. Or, to put it another way, you might say that while many clichés are true, the more you get to know a culture, the more black and white turns to grey. In order to get to grips with a culture, it is not enough to master the language, as cultural idiosyncrasies are more apparent in the way we communicate than in what we communicate. What is required is so-called intercultural communication. The term was coined by the Dutch social psychologist Geert Hofstede, while its most famous proponent is the British linguist Richard D. Lewis. In his classic book When Cultures Collide, 2005, he defines three main cultural types: the linear active, the multi-active, and the reactive. 1. The linear active, who include most of Western Europe and the USA, talk about as much as they listen, have fairly restrained body language, are polite but direct, like to deal in facts, and place value on the written word. They don't do two things at once. 2. The multi-active, such as Mediterraneans or Saudi Arabians, are loquacious, gesticulate a lot, are emotional, juggle with facts, place value on the spoken word, and do many things at the same time. 3. The reactive, such as the Japanese, Chinese, and Koreans, speak less and try to get their counterpart to speak first. They have very subtle body language, are courteous and indirect, are non-confrontational, and place value on face-to-face communication. But contrary to what our schematic categorization might suggest, there are no pure alignments, only spectrums. Indians, for example, are hybrid. They're both reactive and multi-active. Canada is on the borderline between linear active and reactive. Linear active, if you're intrigued by the questions what, when, how many. Multi-active, if you're intrigued by how people communicate and relate to each other. Reactive if you're convinced by who says it and their experience and authority.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?